Hi, Alan.
Hello. Hi, Laura. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I see Michelle Friend is with us too. You'll need to unmute.
There we go. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. We have to wait for the board members to join us, but once we do
Okay.
that, we'll take up your matter, and it should only take a couple of minutes to act on your request.
Okay. Sounds good.
After that, we have a discussion with people from the planning board about the accessory dwelling unit bylaw amendments that they're proposing, which would directly affect your request.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know if you've been following any of that, but the planning board has for a while now been trying to make changes to the bylaw that applies to what they call accessory dwelling units, in order to make it easier to get the kind of relief you're seeking. So
Yeah. The building, the gentleman, oh my God, I forget his name, Walter. He was the one that was telling me a little bit about it, that you guys had already kind of put it in the works, that you were talking about it. So he gave me a little bit of background.
yeah, it's not the Board of Appeals that's pursuing this, it's the planning board, but
Right.
it affects us, and so we've been involved in the discussion of what they're proposing to do.
Right. Okay.
So I see we have Laverne with us. Hi, Laverne.
Hello, good evening.
And Nancy's here. Hi, Nancy.
Hello.
Mike is in the process of joining us. He's still muted, and we don't have his video yet. Mike, can you hear us? Are you mute? Can you unmute? Still waiting for Mike.
Is it just the three of us tonight? Four of us? Mike and Nancy and you?
Nadir is away, so he won't be able to join us.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi,
Jody.
how are
How
you?
are you?
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. We have a brief matter before we get to the planning board's proposal that we'll
Great.
do. We're waiting for Mike Donovan to fully log in here. Mike, I don't know if you can hear us, but we can't hear you.
How about now?
Oh, I hear you now.
Okay, good.
Are you going to join us by video?
Yeah, hold on.
It's up to you. You don't have to.
Well, depends on if anybody wants to be shocked.
Why is that?
That's a leading
There we
question.
go.
What have you been up to, Mike?
Oh, not much, not much. Just
Taking boxing lessons or something?
still working on it. Hold on. Hold on. Just had to click the right menu item. Come on. I'm not sure why it's not coming up.
Well, you can keep working on it while we start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a meeting of the planning board of the zoning board of appeals. We had received an application for a hearing from Michelle Friend, who is with us. She was looking for approval of an accessory apartment, or an accessory dwelling unit as it's called. Because her house was not built before January 1st, 1985, under the current bylaw, she has a problem. So given that the planning board is in the process of suggesting amendments to the bylaw, she has asked for leave to withdraw her application without prejudice. So first question is, does anybody on the board have any concerns about that?
Ellen,
No.
can you explain to me what without prejudice means?
Yes, if you apply, Nancy's one of our newer members, so she
Bear
hasn't
with
dealt
me.
with all of these kinds of things. Anyone who applies for relief from the board, if the relief is denied, they can't come back to the board for similar relief for at least 2 years. And so if you withdraw your application before the board acts on it, then you haven't waived your right to come back sooner than 2 years from now.
Thank you.
So does anyone have any concerns about the request to withdraw the application without prejudice?
No, I don't.
Mike, you have any concerns?
Nope, none.
Then I'll entertain a
None.
motion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the request by Michelle Friend to withdraw her application without prejudice.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second,
Any discussion?
second,
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Okay, the request is approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so follow town meeting. If
Okay.
you follow the developments of town meeting to see whether they act on this. If in fact it does go forward and gets approved, then you may want to consider renewing your application.
Okay, so at what point would that, if that was going to happen, when would that be? Do you know? If it was, like, what would be the process if it was going to be approved? How far out?
Well, as I understand the process, this is a proposed change to the zoning bylaw.
Okay,
And as I understand the process, all zoning bylaws have to be submitted to the Attorney General's office for approval. I think the reason for that is to make sure it doesn't conflict with any state statutes.
Okay.
Because the Chapter 40A is the state statute that governs zoning issues. So I think the Attorney General always reviews zoning changes to make sure they're consistent with the state law. And that may take a while, depending on how quickly they get to it and how complicated it is. So it may be a while before that actually gets approved and the bylaw goes into effect.
okay,
And I don't know what's the best way to keep track of when it actually gets approved. What you can do is, one option is to inquire of the town clerk periodically, whether they've gotten any word as to what the Attorney General's office has done. The other way to do it is to talk to the planning board. I assume they would probably be following it to know when, in fact, it gets approved by the Attorney General and goes into effect. So
okay. Is anything ever posted online?
The planning board might. I don't know if they post on these things or not.
Okay.
Laura or Jody, do you know whether the results of the Attorney General's review would get posted or anything posted as to when the bylaw actually goes into effect?
I'm not sure, maybe Laura has an answer on that, but sort of step one is bringing this proposed bylaw update to town meeting. And Michelle, assuming, which is just an assumption, that
Yep.
it passes at town meeting, then it goes to the Attorney General for review. So that would be what, May 1st or whatever the date is of town meeting. And then Laura, do you have any perspective on typically how long that period of review is? You're on mute, Laura.
You need to unmute.
Thanks. I think it varies from year to year and from attorney general to attorney general. And where there's a new attorney general in place, it's a little hard to predict.
Okay.
But in the past, it's been, I think this past year, it was maybe September or October. I mean, it seemed to take several months,
Okay.
Unfortunately.
All right. That's fine. So I'll just check back in. The town hall's not that far from my house, so I can always check in.
You can always give a call too, as well.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right.
Good
Have a
luck
nice
with you.
night.
Good luck next time.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Okay, so our other item on the agenda is the draft of the proposed bylaw changes that the planning board has prepared. What I thought I would do is to ask Jody and Laura to give us an update on where things stand. I have circulated to the board members the latest draft that you submitted to me. So if you want to walk us through where we are, then we can go from there.
Sure, thank you. I have a very short presentation if that's helpful, or I can just tell you what we've been up to. It's really how you want to use the time.
Well, we're at your disposal, so whatever
Okay.
you think is best.
Okay, so basically, for those who are familiar or may not be totally familiar with accessory dwelling units, they're basically residential living units that are either attached to or detached from the primary residence on a single family home lot. The definition basically alludes to the idea that these residential living units are self-contained in that they have their own sleeping, cooking, and sanitary facilities. And they provide a separate entrance from the main entrance, on the primary home. So the idea here with the accessory dwelling unit bylaw update is to take what's in place here in Dover and to make some tweaks to it for the purposes of making it a little bit more clear and accessible for residents of Dover. So you probably know, but maybe you don't, because I didn't until I started working on this, that Dover already allows what are called accessory apartments in some circumstances. So Michelle's application sort of referenced this, but section 185-43 of the bylaw refers to accessory apartments. And it was a bylaw that was approved at town meeting 34 years ago in May of 1986. So Dover was actually kind of an early adopter in the state on this idea of accessory dwelling or accessory apartment units in town. And the existing bylaw on the books allows accessory apartments to be permitted under certain circumstances and under the oversight of all of you guys on the Zoning Board of Appeals through the special permit process. The current bylaw that we do have limits construction of accessory apartments, as Alan referred to a few minutes ago with Michelle, to houses that were legally occupied on January 1st, 1985, and that have not been substantially enlarged since then. And it also caps the total number of ADUs allowed in town to 10% of the total housing stock. So we look at this and think, wow, that was kind of awesome that Dover was really ahead of its time in the adoption of this accessory bylaw in 1986. But we think it's a good time to revisit it and think about how we might update it in certain ways. And the most important reason for that is that we've had a lot of feedback from residents about the availability and affordability of housing options in town. And I don't think anybody's a stranger to the issues going on in Dover with affordability. And so our goals with the update, as we've been working on it actually for quite a couple of years, are to do three things primarily. First, to broaden the types of housing available to households of all incomes, ages, and sizes. That includes people like caregivers. It includes college kids or young adults returning home. It includes aging parents, the kinds of extended family or staff that can really help people stay in their homes. So that's number one, to address housing affordability and flexibility, but to do so while limiting impact on our neighborhoods and on our residential character and certainly on town infrastructure. And then the third piece of the puzzle is to just clarify and simplify to some extent the necessary steps and regulations so that approval of ADUs can be efficient for homeowners and for builders and other interested parties in town. So that's how we started with this process, trying to accomplish those goals. And we think that actually now is a remarkably good time to be doing this for a few reasons, but one of them is that in 2021, Massachusetts passed a law often referred to as the Housing Choice Bill. It was signed into law after passage in January of 2021 and signed by then Governor Charlie Baker. The new law allows municipalities to adopt certain zoning measures like this one, like accessory dwelling units, by a simple majority under certain circumstances. So 50% plus one vote if we meet certain criteria when we bring the bylaw to town meeting. And those include, when it comes to ADUs, the ADUs must be a maximum of 900 square feet, could be 50% of the primary dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is less. So if you have a 2,000 square foot home, 50% would be 1,000 and therefore 900. And that's really driven by the desire not to fundamentally change the overall look and feel of our residential areas. And also to make sure that these accessory dwelling units remain accessory to the primary structure as opposed to, becoming 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 square foot units. Also part of the housing choice bill, the requirement is that attached ADUs, those which are literally physically attached to the primary residence, it's an attic, it could be a basement, it could be an extension or an addition to the home off the back or the side. Those attached ADUs must be allowed by right. So meaning, not requiring a special permit. But if a detached ADU is brought to the attention of the town, then that may be allowed by right or by special permit. So those are some of the parameters of the housing choice bill that we've been thinking about as we've been drafting this bylaw update. So as I said, this all began back in 1986. And for a little bit of background for all of you, in 2012, the town's master plan started indicating the need to increase the types of housing available and to address kind of overall housing needs in Dover. In 2020, there was a bylaw update that was in sort of development and then withdrawn because of COVID. That was 2020. And then in 2021, the town developed a housing production plan, and that also indicated the need to increase the types of housing available in Dover. So we're kind of like the drumbeat is building. We're getting a lot of feedback from residents around affordability and whatnot. We tried to bring an update to section 185-43 for town meeting again in 2021, but that was again withdrawn, and that was due to COVID considerations for the second year in a row. In 2022, we prepared it, and then we withdrew it based upon feedback from residents and really great feedback from your board, and really tried to relook at the process for bringing these things through to town meeting. And we think we've done an awful lot better this time, and we hope you agree. But it's been an ongoing series of public meetings, open hearings for, going back to 2020 really on this. So it's really something we've been working hard and thinking a lot about. As a result, we think we've developed a bylaw that's really tailored specifically for Dover. We have lots of models in surrounding towns, and I can tell you about those towns if you're interested, but we really want to think hard and long about what makes sense for Dover and to take advantage of some of the flexibility provided by the housing choice bill that were offered. We think that this bylaw that we've developed meets the growing needs of residents in town. It advances town housing goals to a certain extent. And it's obviously needs to be consistent with other zoning bylaws, the overall zoning bylaws that are in town. So you've had a chance to review it. I would say some of the key highlights, comparing the existing bylaw versus the proposed update to the bylaw. Number one, we're changing the definition to bring it up into consistency with the state utilization of the term accessory dwelling unit as opposed to accessory apartment. So that's number one. And we are proposing to follow the housing choice bill parameters by making attached ADUs available. I don't know if that's the right word, Ellen, legally, but by right with site plan approval from the planning board. Right now, a resident who wants an attached ADU would need to pursue a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. But if we follow the housing choice law, then that would have to change, and that's what we're proposing. But that detached ADUs, despite the fact that the housing choice bill allows for them to be either available to residents by right or by special permit, we're keeping those accessible by special permit. So a special permit would continue to be needed for any accessory dwelling unit in a detached structure. So think about a barn or a detached garage. And we have, you know, a reasonable number of barns and things like that in Dover. So felt good to leave that where it is, which is in the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Another thing that we've looked at spent a lot of time on is this issue of short-term rentals, because I know that's a concern for a lot of residents. So we've spelled that out in the last line of the draft bylaw that you guys are looking at, where currently there's no specific language about short-term rentals of ADUs in the existing bylaw, but we are proposing to include it in the update. So that's a reasonably big change. The square footage doesn't change. We're maxing it at 900 square feet to keep in accordance with what we have, but also with what the state is saying, you know, across the board with housing choice bill. And then we are looking to remove the limitation on accessory dwelling units in newer homes. So the limitation that accessory dwelling units would only be available in homes built or occupied by January 1st, 1985 would be removed in the update, as would the 10% cap on ADUs in town. And so that's the key highlights from the bill. We've also reorganized it so that we are trying to do a really thoughtful job of making it very obvious and clear to residents what the process is, to be very clear about the role of the Board of Health. You know, like all Board of Health regulations apply when it comes to things like water and waste removal. And generally speaking, all zoning obviously applies to accessory dwelling units. And we've tried to spell that out so there's no confusion, and to say, look, if you are coming with an attached ADU, here's the process. If you're coming with a detached ADU, here's the process. And we hope you agree that we've done a good job, and we welcome your feedback. When it comes to getting this to town meeting, just a reminder to everybody that since we do have an accessory apartment bylaw on the books, we're not talking about, do we allow for accessory dwelling units in Dover or don't we? Because if this does not pass at town meeting, the existing bylaw just stays on the books. So accessory apartments will still continue to be available to residents living in homes occupied by on or before January 1st, 1985. And then people who want a waiver of that or some sort of a zoning relief would continue to come to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's the quick and dirty. I'm happy to answer any questions, or thankfully Laura's here because she's actually the smart one on this topic. And we'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts on what we've circulated.
Thank you, Jody. That's great. This is obviously a more simplified and streamlined proposal than what was on the table last year. So it's a lot easier to deal with.
Yep.
I had a few questions. I don't have any concerns with the kind of big picture aspects of it. Short-term rentals, where are you in terms of what constitutes a short-term rental?
We do have a definition. Laura, can you recall off the top of your head? Oh, it's in the bylaw. We actually put that in there. I can tell you.
I'm just gonna.
We reference it in the bylaw on line 10, section D10. An ADU shall not be used as a short-term rental as defined in section 185(5) of the zoning bylaw. So we have a definition of a short-term rental, which is 30 days or less. And so that's what we're referring back to.
Jody, how do you monitor that? Yeah, I bet
that's
$1 million question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of those situations where, you know, we want to create a bylaw that makes it pretty easy for people to do the right thing. Just like, you know, we can't fully monitor it because we're acting on the assumption that people will do the right thing. And to a certain extent, that depends on people doing the right thing, just like it's true when somebody renovates a bathroom or something and doesn't notify the building department. So if we make it streamlined, we make it a little bit easier, then the goal obviously is that people will do the right thing. And then certainly there is, we have a zoning enforcement officer in town. And so we have reviewed this very, very carefully with him and gotten his quite extensive feedback, and Laura had a great conversation with him to make sure that all of his concerns and points of feedback were baked in to this draft, which I believe they are. And Laura, you can speak to that a little bit more, but it's a really good question, Nancy. You know, we do our best in a small town without a lot of staff, is the answer.
I think, can I chime in on that,
Yeah.
Ellen?
Of course.
Okay, I was just going to say to Nancy's question, I think cities and towns all over the country are dealing with this short-term rental problem, especially in tourist areas, whether it's Provincetown, New Orleans, New York City, everywhere in between. And I think enforcement has got to be tough anywhere you go.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes, for better or for worse, enforcement goes to the neighbors.
Yeah.
Dropping a dime on their neighbor if they see people coming and going and coming and going, you know, with, you know, no stop, and there's, you know, no obvious reason. I think someone might,
Yeah.
you know, make a phone call and say, hey, you know, we just are concerned what's going on, and could someone please check?
Yep. It's a
Um,
great point, Laura. And actually, that is why, Nancy, we put it specifically in this bylaw, because we wanted it to be like completely undeniable what the intent of this bylaw is, which is
And I
to
think I read
prohibit
only,
short-term rentals.
you can't put a new driveway in. You have to use the existing driveway
Exactly, which is
and you have to have adequate parking.
exactly. It's the intent of this bylaw is that this is not moving us away from single family residences, right? We don't want this to become a town with lots of driveways driving all over the place. So the sort of primary residence maintains its status as the primary residence, and an accessory dwelling unit is exactly that, accessory to the primary residence.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have you had a lot of people trying to get accessory apartments? I mean, I've been on the Board of Appeals, I don't want to tell you, for 24 years. And I think that Alan will tell you this too. We've had maybe 3 cases. I don't
know.
see
Exactly.
a huge amount of trying to
Exactly.
do- And I have
You're
another,
absolutely right. It's
what is
true.
can an ADU be a Winnebago? Can an ADU be a camper or a house trailer? I don't see that mentioned anywhere in your things. To me, that could be someplace that somebody could live. Just pull a camper up in the backyard. And the septic, so will it go into the septic system of the house? So if it's a 3-bedroom septic, then you can't have an ADU because you've already got 3 bedrooms. I mean,
Yeah, that would be under the purview of the Board of Health.
questions.
Absolutely. That would be under the purview of the Board of Health. And we've tried to clarify that, you know, in writing as well.
And do you think that people will move in here, or somebody from Brookline will say, oh, I think I'll see if I can get an ADU in Dover? I mean, the people are going to want people in their yard that they know. Like I
Right.
have a beautiful barn. It would be perfect if my brother wanted to come up from Georgia and live.
Exactly.
I could get into a residence for him, but I wouldn't want some stranger living there.
Right. And
I
there
don't
would be no
know,
reason
but
for
I
you
have
to do
so
that.
many
Right.
questions about this. I have a lot of questions about this. Many people in town already have a pool house.
Yeah.
Big enough to be an AD. Just put in a toilet and there's already put in a kitchen and you're all set. But I don't, I'm not opposed to it. I just can't picture it, you know?
Well,
Laverne, the owner of the property has control over
exactly.
who occupies the accessory unit. So,
yes, but the fact that they're trying to make it more affordable for other people, we're not going to probably get a lot of, you know, I mean, like I think
you're right, Laverne. I don't think the intent here. Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've heard from people is, wow, my dad has been widowed and I'd really love him to live closer, and I have this space above my garage and that would be an amazing. Or there's a teacher in town or a teacher at the school district who's looking for a place to live, but Dover's unaffordable, and maybe there's a homeowner who has a detached accessory dwelling unit that would be a great and affordable place, which the homeowner would want to rent to that person. That might be an example. Or another form of a caregiver, or a young family with a baby who's moving back in with their parents, essentially into an accessory dwelling unit on the primary residence. That's really, the visioning around this. And that's the logic in a lot of communities around Dover. And in fact, there are about 40 communities in the surrounding areas that now allow ADUs. And as I said, Dover was kind of an early adopter. Don't forget, we already allow this. We just limit it to older homes. But Needham passed an accessory dwelling bylaw update in 2020. Obviously, ours 1986. Wellesley just passed one in 2022. Weston, Carlisle, Lexington, Westwood, Newton, lots of towns do this now. And the numbers are not particularly dramatic on the uptick, even in places like Newton. They've had theirs on the books for about 20 years. And in that time period, I think they've had a little, like, I think as of 2017, they had 73 applications, which is like 3.5 per year in that 20-year period. So it's not like we're going to get overrun. That's not the expectation. And by the way, the only way they happen is if a homeowner, pursues one and wants to invest in it.
But to Laverne's point, how do you make sure that people don't say, "Oh, my Winnebago counts, my whatever, my trailer"? I mean,
I'll let Laura answer that one. Yeah, I'll let Laura answer.
Well, whatever space is used as an accessory dwelling unit has to meet the building code for habitation.
Okay.
It has to be connected to a septic system. You can't have a holding tank on an RV and maintain that as an accessory dwelling. And in all the other ways, the size of the rooms, the bedrooms,
the setbacks,
the
from the lot
setbacks,
lines.
Every other way. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things based on my own experience working for the town of Scituate, where they made a similar change. Actually, when I first went to work there back in the late 1990s, they had a restriction on when the house had to be built. And they took that out in the 1990s, later on. And they did get a few more ADUs, but not really that many. I think during the time I was there, which was 20 years, there were maybe about 80 of them. So, maybe 3 or 4 a year, something like that. And I would say the great majority of them were built for family members. They weren't built as rentals. And they were for situations where you had an elderly relative or young relatives that you wanted to support in some way as they were, getting out into the world, and give them a place to live. Just because wherever you go in Massachusetts, it can be difficult to get that down payment and to get into the housing market for the first time. Certainly not for everyone, but for some people, that's an issue. And it's to support, people like that. But I would say primarily older relatives who wanted to be with their kids, with their adult kids, but they still wanted to have some independence. That's the main thing it was used for.
And 900 square feet is not a lot of space. So it's not like you can have a family with several kids move in and take up residence. So,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it really is for, 1 or 2 people kind of thing, I would think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did have a technical suggestion.
Yeah.
At the beginning, one thing you do is you're adding a line to the use table for 31 and 30. Instead of just 31, you've got 31 and 32 to distinguish between attached and detached ADUs. There are more lines after that in the existing table, 3 or 4 more lines. So in your proposed language, I think you need to say, you say Article 20, in the first paragraph there, that you're deleting line 31 and adding new lines 31 and 32. And I think you need to also say that existing lines 32 through whatever are renumbered 33 through whatever it needs to be.
Okay, Alan, we
actually-
say
oh,
that
sorry.
in, sorry, Laura, we say that
Go ahead.
in number 2, just below, and maybe you can let us know if you think that suffices or if you suggest it go in both places.
I think it's probably better to say it in both places just to make sure there's no confusion.
Okay. Laura, you got that?
I do actually. I was going back and forth with Carl Valenti today about the final language for the warrant, and I think the language that we got came from Nina Pickering Cook, and it, I had that renumbering in the text that that I put together. She didn't put that in her summary. So it's not in her summary. I was told that today was the very last day to make any changes to the warrant language. I'm not completely sure if that's true because I'm not directly involved with it, but we can try.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
We can
Okay.
certainly try.
Okay, I
Thank
have
you.
one other suggestion in terms of language, well, 2 others, but you refer a number of times to ADUs as the abbreviation for accessory dwelling units.
Mhm.
And you really, I think it would be good to indicate, normally when you're shorthanding something like that, the first time where you first use the phrase, in this case, accessory dwelling units, you put a parenthetical that indicates that thereafter you're going to refer to it as the shorthand ADU. So on what I'm looking at here, it's the section 185-43 says accessory dwelling units, and you could just put in parentheses there ADUs, because you then start referring to ADUs without having previously defined. It's obvious what you're referring
Right.
to, but it's good practice to put in the shorthand that way.
Okay.
So that
Yeah.
you don't want to end up having any kind of misunderstanding, and not that that's likely here, but it's just I consider it good practice to do that, and
Okay.
when I'm writing a brief or whatever, I always do that. So
Thank you.
when you're dealing with something like this that's legislation, it's always a good idea to do everything you can to avoid any kind of confusion or uncertainty.
Great.
The other thing I had in section D, paragraph 7 about parking,
Mhm.
where you say that that the Board of Appeals of the Planning Board may require screening of such parking to protect the neighbors. It's conceivable that you might have other reasons than just protecting the neighbors to require screening. And so I wonder if you want to, this is an example where by putting that in and not considering other reasons for it, you could create a limitation there that screening can only be required to protect the neighbors and not to serve some other purpose, whether it's noise or visual from the street or whatever it is. You might want to either take that out or put in some more general language, to, for example, say protect the neighbors or for such other purposes as are necessary to whatever your general objective is. And I know you may have, the language may be finalized in terms of putting it in the warrant, but if necessary, you can always, not that you want to have to make amendments on the floor of town meeting, but you can always do that if you need to deal with these kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say, screening for the neighbors, protect?
Well, I don't, we haven't been involved in the discussions. No, I don't know where the language comes from. I don't think that's in the existing bylaw.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, Ellen. I'm thinking about that while you're talking.
And you know, maybe that's all you need, but it just occurred to me that there could be more general reasons.
Yeah,
or
I agree.
or, you know, somebody could argue that you're really not doing it to protect the neighbors, so it doesn't, not required. I don't know. I just, that occurred to me and might be something to think about.
Okay, thank you. Yep,
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I think it's a great point.
You generally want to, you know, if there's a more, if there can be multiple reasons to
Yeah.
do something like screening, then you don't want to inadvertently prevent yourself from serving those other reasons when they apply.
Totally agree.
And you know, to me, screening from the neighbors, screening for the benefit of the neighbors or for other reasons, may be something that's really important in a given situation, a particular ADU application. So you don't want to have a applicant, you know, avoid the screening because they can argue it's not necessary to protect the neighbors and you
Right.
want it really for something else.
Right. Okay, gotcha. I think that's a great point. We'll work on that.
May not ever be a big deal, but you know, it could be, you just never know.
Yeah, may as well take the moment while we have it to get it right.
And I also was wondering, in paragraph B as in boy of 185-43, the draft I'm looking at looks like it has an extra word. In the first sentence, it says an attached ADU shall be defined as an accessory dwelling unit that is, it says located, attached to, or within, and is the word
Yeah, I think the
located-
word located needs to come out.
that was
right,
my
Laura?
thought.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Attached
That
to
was
or
my
within.
thought.
Thank you.
And the other thought I had is in wordsmithing here and that same section C, paragraph 3, special permit from the zoning board of appeals.
Yep.
The wording of the beginning of the sentence there, a public hearing for an application for a detached ADU special permit. My suggestion would be that you word it as an application for a special permit for a detached ADU. Just a little bit smoother language, I think, in my view.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you know, those are my kind of wordsmithing suggestions. I don't
Great.
have any major issues in terms of substance, other than
Great.
what I've mentioned.
Yeah.
How about other members of the Board of Appeals? Anyone have specific concerns or suggestions about any of this? Or comments?
Are there any language or any information on the minimum separation of buildings when you have a detached ADU?
All of the zoning setbacks in the existing bylaw apply here to a single family residence. So any setbacks requirements for the lot apply.
But how
You know what I
far
mean?
from
What
the
about
house? How far from the other house, I think is what he's asking.
Right, the setback from the
what
lot
about
line
separation of buildings?
of the two buildings.
Well, separation of buildings. Yes.
I think that would probably be a function of the site plan review and making sure that they're not right on top of each other. Sometimes you do see that with a detached garage, that there's like 4 feet of space between the garage and the house. But in this situation, you're going to have the planning board looking at it, you know, for the site plan, and then the zoning board is going to look at it for the special permit. So, you know, the boards have 2 cracks at it, basically. So hopefully you could have a dialogue with the applicant and just say, hey, you know, this is really close here and it
Mike,
needs to
is
be
your
further
concern
away.
that they might be too far apart or too close together?
Well, if we get an application for a special permit, what are the guidelines that we gauge the special permit against? And if we have to provide relief, what are we providing relief on?
Well, I think that's
Just
driven
not,
by
it's
the
just,
special permit process. So what we're saying is in that scenario, the special permit process applies. We're not changing anything about that special permit process that you would currently, review that structure.
So Mike, that if it's coming to the Board of Appeals because it's a detached ADU, we would, number one, ensure that that the proposed ADU meets the requirements of the bylaw. And then we would also be making a determination that what's proposed is not, as the legal standard says, substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So that gives you some control over, what it looks like, how it's situated. Is it too close to the house next door, that sort of thing. Even if it's within the setback requirements, it still might be a problem for whatever reason. They're going to take down a bunch of trees to put it in, that somehow changes the look and feel, within those kind of constraints. That I do recall Jerry Clark indicating in one of our previous meetings last year when we were discussing the previous proposal that there are limitations because of septic requirements. What they're going to do in terms of an ADU, if you're worried about it being too far away from the main house, that may create problems in terms of tying into the existing septic system, for example. That would impose some natural constraints on what they can feasibly do as a practical matter. I don't know if that answers your
All right,
concern, but
no, just bringing it up, that just, we have a lot of bylaws and, setbacks and lot lines and, distances from, wetlands and all that stuff, but there's no like minimum distance between buildings. And I guess I worry that, at some point we're going to come up against an ADU detached that's going to be like right on top of the next house. And, maybe the neighbors aren't going to like it because, for whatever reason. And, then we're kind of in a quandary. So just wondering if there was any, number, like 10 feet, 15 feet.
well, the
Something
setback
that's thought about.
the setback requirements are more onerous than that. So normally, you have to be 40 feet back from the street and 30 feet from the side and rear lot line. So you're not going to be right on top of your next door neighbor. And if the existing house that they want to build an ADU in connection with is a non-conforming structure because it's too close to the lot line, then that's a reason why putting in an ADU that's even closer to the lot line or the same distance or whatever might not be something we would approve.
Okay.
So we do, we
All
do
right.
have the authority
Just,
to deal with those kind of concerns. Is that
okay,
helpful?
that was, one question I have. Okay, that's fine. How do the bylaws deal with neighborhood complaints? Somewhere, somehow along the way, somebody's going to have an ADU and they're going to rent it to maybe a bunch of college kids for a college semester. And college kids do what college kids do. And, how are the neighbors or how does the town enforce, keeping it quiet or, making sure the lights and the music aren't blaring, 2 o'clock in the morning? Any like restraints or any kind of clamps you can put on the ADUs for that, or some type of enforcement mechanism that, goes beyond just, calling the cops because, a bunch of kids are too rowdy?
I think actually, in a lot of ways, the ADU is going to be easier to control than a single family house, because a single family house, an owner can rent out. They can be in Florida or, somewhere. The whole house is rented out, maybe to a group of college kids. With the ADU, it's a requirement that the owner has to be living on the property for most of the time that ADU is in existence. So most people would not tolerate the kind of situation that you're talking about, I think.
We hope.
Does that make sense?
I definitely
Well, I
wouldn't.
also think, Mike, I think that,
Just-
you know, it's not like we're within walking distance of the Boston College campus or something. Dover's fairly, a fair
Yeah,
distance.
that Dunkin'
from,
Donuts is pulling in.
you know,
Just
there are,
asking.
we do have ADUs in town now, accessory apartments, and I don't know if there's been problems, but I haven't heard of any. And 900 square feet is not a lot of space.
Okay.
You know, if you were trying to cram more than 2 college students in there, it might be a little tight. Yep.
Okay. All right. Another question I have is, the bylaw doesn't cover how ADUs are treated for taxation purposes, or is that in another part of the bylaw?
Good question. Laura, you want to address that? Because you've just researched that.
Okay. I spoke to Amy Gao about that question about how an ADU is going to be taxed. And she told me that when there is an extra kitchen or an extra bathroom, that those are taxed, you know, those have a higher tax rate than just basic residential space. But otherwise, the space would not be taxed any differently from any other residential space.
Okay, I got you. Last one is, people that put ADUs on their property, increases the value of your property, but the value of the ADU by itself may be an enticing way of somebody to get out of debt, you know, pay off some, you know, bad loans. Or is there anything in the bylaws to prevent ADUs from being either sold or traded?
What do we have? It has to be on a property with a single family house. It can't be on its own lot. All the zoning laws that Dover has that govern how land can be divided are still going to be in effect. So you're not going to be able to just spin it off into onto a separate lot. And it's going to be very difficult and hopefully impossible with people kind of watching what's going on to condominiumize them.
Okay, I just worry that, you know, you got $300,000 sitting beside you and you could get some money for it and pay off some
Right.
bad debt, or, you know, somebody would probably be willing to sell off, you know,
I
part of
think
his
the
ownership, or.
I think the simple answer is that it's a single family lot. It's a single family home lot with a primary residence and an accessory structure, and they cannot be divided unless the whole lot is divided. And we're talking about obviously detached ADUs here. And so therefore it would need its own water, it would need its own waste, it would need, you know, there's a whole lot that would go along with that. It wouldn't be a simple process at all.
Yeah, I
And I
have a hard time, Mike, envisioning
Yeah.
how that would happen. No, I think it's
Well, somebody could sell the right to the house. Couldn't somebody
The
sell
right-
the right to use the house for the next 100 years for the sum of $350,000, which is essentially selling it?
I
I mean, you're only going to own a 900 square foot house if there is any way to do that. You're never going to be able to enlarge it.
And also on a single family lot that you don't own. I'm not sure how you would sell a house on property you don't own. I'm not sure about that, but maybe Ellen has other insights into that.
Well,
That might be above my pay grade.
Here's an example for you. Martha's Vineyard, the camp meeting grounds. All the cottages on our property are owned by the people living in them but they do not own the land around them.
But that might have something to do with the underlying zoning in that area of Martha's Vineyard that allows for that.
Yeah, I think
Maybe.
that's right, Mike. I think that's
Yeah,
a
but
not
they
your
still-
typical,
but they
not
still
your
build
average
it on
situation.
property.
I'm sorry?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think anything like that would be permitted under the Dover bylaws. And you know, you'd need some.
Okay.
Martha's
I
Vineyard,
just-
obviously, you know, because it was summer camps or whatever, was not your normal situation, and I just don't see any way that would be feasible here. I'm not a real estate lawyer, and maybe it's
Mhm.
All right,
possible.
just
but,
wait, just,
um,
all right, just
hard for me to see
raising
how
the
that would
issue.
happen. No, I appreciate the questions. I
Okay.
think it's important to try and envision these kinds of unusual scenarios.
It's
that
a
might
great question.
come at us.
It's so true. We've had, you know, a number of meetings on this, and we get some amazingly nuanced questions on this, and it's been very helpful because it's pushed us to try to, you know, throw a lot of things against the wall. And I think that it helps us develop a better bylaw and also helps us be a little more prepared for town meeting. So thank you.
Laverne, did you have something?
Well, I did, and talk about an oddball thing thrown against the wall, but I am big on lighting.
Mhm.
So my next door neighbor, who's lovely, I love him, but they put in this swimming pool. He's got 11 lights that stay on all night. And now he's got a pool house with 3 big lights that stay on all night. So I'm wondering if there's some way we could limit little spotlights coming off the top of these new ADUs, which
Mhm.
sounds very remote. One of my friends is on the zoning board in Weston, and she sent me a copy of the lighting, the lighting bylaw in Weston. And I found it extremely interesting because these new houses that are being built, I think is one of the features that they have lights that stay on all night.
Mm.
And you see them all around now. But
Mm.
I enjoy the darkness of the night. I think that now I don't see any bats. I don't see any raccoons. I don't see anything in my yard anymore because both of my neighbors have lights that shine on my house.
Mm.
My house is pitch black.
Mhm.
I like a pitch black. house.
Laverne, I think
Anyway,
your
it's
comments contain the answer to your question, which is maybe Dover needs a bylaw that addresses lighting issues.
lighting, yes,
You know, it's not something that would be limited to ADUs, obviously, because it applies
no,
in your situation. So maybe, I don't know if the planning board is the right board to deal with something like that, but if that's as big, if I were in your situation, I wouldn't be thrilled either.
lights on both sides just shining in my house. And behind
Oh.
me now, I had to have some trees, two of my trees died from the drought, I mean, just died. And I had them removed, and now the house behind me has 100 lights that are just blaring through my kitchen window. It's like, I can't get away from the lights. But anyway.
I think Jody's taking
I-
notes
I-
about what their next project's gonna be.
So Jody, if you give me your email, I can email you this bylaw from Weston. It's very
Okay.
interesting. It's not long. It's not very long.
All right, thank you. I'd love to see it. We
Okay.
do, as part of site plan review, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, but, you know, we do reference lighting when we do the site plan review process, particularly for pools and other things. I'm thinking about pools because you mentioned your neighbor's pools, because
Yes, and
my
they're
feeling
brand
is
new
that we
pool.
generally refer to lighting in site plan, the site plan review process, because it is part of the process that we go through.
Well, it would be nice if the process just said all exterior lighting must be on a timer that goes out at 11 o'clock. That's all. So it's
Well,
not
maybe a
on
little
all.
more complicated than that, but that would be part of it. The Board of Appeals has dealt with lighting issues in some matters that come before it. For example, the 40B on County Road or County Street, I guess it is, that just got approved. We specifically addressed lighting issues so that it wouldn't affect the neighbors there. But that's the kind of facility that
Right.
would have outside lighting you wouldn't normally have for a single family home. But it does, I think it is reasonable to raise the issue, and given things like your situation, Laverne, that
Yep.
would make that a broader issue that needs to be addressed.
Think it should be. I'll send it. Jody, what's your email address? Or the
It's,
town hall?
let's see, what is my Dover email address? Hang on, I think it's jshu@dover.ma. It's, let me just say J. Yeah, jshu, SHUE,
Mhm.
@doverma.gov.
Okay, anybody else
Okay.
have any other questions or concerns about the proposed bylaw? Hearing none? Well, thank you,
So-
Jody and Laura. We appreciate your joining us and hope
Thank you very
what we have to
much.
say is of some benefit.
Yeah, no, this is super helpful. Thank you. We'll go back with those sort of some of those suggestions on the specific language. You know, one of the things that the Board of Health has also reviewed this, and we have sort of verbal, I would say, support for this bylaw update. We expect that they will vote as a board in March to support the bylaw update at town meeting. And I would just ask for your consideration that you might do something along those lines. Some mechanism for us to express support from the Zoning Board of Appeals for this endeavor. That's part of our plan to try to get to town meeting with as much support from the various boards as we possibly can, so we can make it a smooth process.
Well, Jody, we're a little different from other boards. We're kind of quasi judicial in nature, and because we have to make rulings and decisions on specific matters that come before us, I think it's probably not appropriate for us to take a formal position on this.
Mhm.
But I think it's certainly appropriate for you to say to town meeting or whoever that you have had input from the Board of
Okay,
Appeals.
got it. Okay, fair enough. Great. All right, then, any other questions? Thank you for listening,
Okay.
and thanks for letting
Well,
us be here tonight. Laura, anything I
Thanks for
forgot? that
including
I-
us, and good luck with the rest of the process.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a great
You.
night.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. You too. Good night.
Bye-bye.
I just sent the bylaws. It's right here on my phone. What would we do without our phones? I don't know. Where'd Alan go? Is everybody gone?